Hello again, Morristown, New Jersey. Okay, so we are now on function report number 19. Okay, so let me just see where I can get this up. This is about social activities and how often, in what method, if at all, you spend time with other people. Okay, it's very broad, but you have to be super careful here. All right, and you have to be, as I say with all the questions, you have to be very focused on showing how you do things differently than you did before or more limited. It could be a different methodology, the process in which you interact with people might be different, particularly the things that are related to being disabled or having limitations in doing this. So let's get to it. So 19A says, do you spend time with others in person, on the phone, on the computer, etc.? Yes or no? And they give you different options, I believe, which I'm not looking at that right now because I'm looking at an old form. But so if you speak on the phone, you would check that off. If you text and you only do it by dictating, so many people get their text to other people through or emails through dictation. You have to let that be known because I have seen ALJs determine that someone's fingers weren't bad despite the severe arthritis because they were ostensibly texting. But if they are texting without their fingers, but with their mouths, with dictation, that doesn't come through as clear when you say you're texting, even though you are texting. It's with your voice, right? Not with your fingers. They will assume potentially, and I think generally, that it's with your fingers. And if you claim to have painful fingers and joints, that is going to contradict that potentially. Everything's potentially, right? So if you text with your voice or you email with your voice or everything you do to get a word out in written form is with your voice, definitely let that be known, whether you have to write it in separately or if they ultimately have an option for that. So texting, make it very clear. It is by dictation if it's by dictation. Okay, so you will make clear the things you do with other people. So if you go play poker every Friday night, despite being reporting 9 out of 10 pain constantly, it's going to shoot yourself in the foot. And you probably don't have pain 9 out of 10. I do have a video on how you describe your pain and how you should not be exaggerating it in a different video that came out recently, I think. So look at that. Exaggeration is not helpful, and it can be seen right through. And you don't have to exaggerate. You don't have to have a 10 out of 10 pain 24 hours a day to be found disabled. Okay. So you're going to describe what you do with others. If it is the rare thing, like once a year, or you haven't done it in 2 years, that's not what you do with other people now. This is about now. Okay. So you want to use how you generally do things now, not the things you do rarely. That would be the aberration. And you don't want yourself to be represented as someone this is how I do it if you only do it once a year or even once every 6 months. So just stick with what you do most of the time. That way it's a better representation, more accurate, and I think more responsive. And again, they don't explain it here, probably because they'd like to see you describe something very hefty, but you probably haven't done it in 2 years. I've seen people do this constantly. They take that big, great thing that they did 2 years ago with their loved ones, and they put it in here. I'm like, that's not you today. And this is about you being disabled today, not when you weren't disabled, right? Okay. How often do you do these things? That's where you can kind of clarify the frequency. So let's say you talk on the phone with your wife every day. You can say daily for phone talk, or if it's loved ones, there's not a lot of space here. And there could be many things in A that you've listed and you don't have a lot of space to include them. If you can somehow include it up top, in the first part of A, that would be helpful. Use the space as you can, even if you're clarifying something that's asked in the next question, if you have to. It's better than leaving it out if it clarifies something that's helpful to your case. Okay. B, list the places you go on a regular basis. For example, church, community centers, sport events, social groups, etc. What is a regular basis? Is once a year a regular basis? Not in my book. If you go to church weekly, yes. If you go to a community center, that's kind of rare, but sometimes people that are really disabled do that. That's their only form of socialization. If they live in a community, like I do actually, where there is a community center. Now, granted, nothing goes on there. Like you can't just go hang there. I think it's locked up unless there's an event going on like bingo, which is every week. But that's the kind of thing you could include, particularly if it's close to home. Sports events. Um, I don't know disabled people that go to sports events regularly. Like if anything, they used to and now they can't. Um, so if you went to a game 18 months ago or before COVID, uh, I wouldn't include that as being regular at all. I wouldn't even include that. Social groups, again, if you have a local thing you do every week, you could put that in. Maybe you do go play bingo. Maybe you have a poker group. Um, and this is where if you do it and you do it much shorter than you used to, let's say you play poker, but you only go for an hour because you get really uncomfortable sitting that long at a table. They don't ask you to quantify how poorly or less you do it now, but you're going to want to put that in there. They don't ask it because they don't really want to know that. Okay. Do you need to be reminded to go places? All right. This is probably most applicable to people with some mental health challenges right now. It is not unusual when you've stopped work because of medical problems to feel more anxiety, a lot of worry. You can count that in with anxiety, but people sometimes word things differently. And then if I say different terms for that, it might trigger your mind about it. Anxiety, excess worry, racing thoughts, poor sleep because you're worried and anxious, or depressed. Situational depression, when we are not able to work and do what we used to do, the way we kind of identified a large part of our life, that I'd say more often than not becomes a fact. So when we have those kind of issues going on, worrying about finances because of our disability, it often detracts from our remembering to do certain things. So like, for instance, do you need to be reminded to go places? If you have it in your phone, an alarm the day before a doctor's appointment, that's reminding you. Okay. If you put it on your calendar, that's reminding you. It doesn't say here, notice it doesn't say, does your loved ones have to tap you on the shoulder and say, get to your doctor appointment? It doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be reminders on your phone, on your calendar, as well as reminders from, family or friends that, oh, you have that doctor appointment, or you got to get to the grocery store, or you need to make that Instacart order or that curbside delivery order because we're running out of food. So that would be being reminded, right? And that's a yes or no question. How often do you go and how much do you take part? This is such a weird question. How often do you go? So again, if you told them about church, say weekly, you might have actually included that in the top part of B, like I go to church weekly. Even though it says only list the places you go to on a regular basis, a lot of times people throw in the frequency right with that. But if you didn't, you do that down below. How often do you go and how much do you take part? How much do you take part is such a weird question. I mean, you go to church, you sit there, you listen, right? Most of the time, I think oftentimes the answer is I take part to the point that is reasonably expected of me. Like if you go to a doctor's appointment, you tell them what your complaints are, you tell them your symptoms. So it's kind of a silly question. I suppose if they're trying to get some people who might go to a community center and they play volleyball to say, oh, I play the volleyball at the community center. Well, if you do play the volleyball, yeah, you're going to want to say it. You're probably not disabled, but you're probably going to want to say it because you want to be accurate. You do not want to be leaving out questions that are specifically asked, even if they're going to hurt you. I mean, the bottom line is this is to help find out if you're disabled. I'm trying to show you ways to not show that you are more able than you are. Because these questions seem somewhat designed to do that. But on the same token, you want to be honest, particularly about how much you take part in an activity. If it is what it is. But oftentimes a person their participation is showing up, listening at church. If you go to a social group, you might be sitting down there and, taking that in a genteel way as well. So keep that in mind when you answer that. And the last part is, do you need someone to accompany you? This again could be for physical reasons. You can't go alone because of fear of falling, that kind of thing, or some sort of relapse. Sometimes people run out of steam and will need help to get back home. Maybe they're exhausted. Other times it could be for mental reasons. You can't go out alone. Maybe your fear of an anxiety attack. There's another question in the function report that alludes to that. So you're going to want to make sure that those two are simpatico and aligned together. So answer yes and no, and you can always write down below and describe it. If it's a matter of, I like to have my spouse with me because, it's more fun, that's not really a need, that's more of a want, so I wouldn't include that. Okay, so that's the end of, that's not the end of 19. The last part of 19, let's see. Do you have problems? This is C. Do you have problems getting along with family, friends, and neighbors? Yes or no? This depends all on you and your kind of behaviors and attitudes at this time. Sometimes people, when they are disabled and in pain or mental health challenges are getting too much, they get irritable. Or the pain, they just don't want to go out and see people because they are uncomfortable, they are in pain. And sometimes that causes strife within the relationships. So you're going to want to mention that. If you have outright anger problems, that's a great place to put it. If you think you're starting fights, maybe you regret them a little bit after. Sometimes we open our mouths and then we regret after, right? Kind of include that there. And D, describe any changes in sexual activities and see injuries, illnesses, and conditions begin. I think I flipped those two words. Social activities. If you used to be more social, definitely explain it. If you used to go to those sporting events and now you don't at all, that's usually kind of a social event. I would explain that there. It could be you used to play poker, now you don't. It could be you used to go out to dinner with friends, now you don't. By and large, almost always social activities deteriorate substantially when we're disabled. It just does, whether it's immobility problems without pain or pain, or mental health conditions that make us completely not want to be around people. It could be just that we don't feel sociable. We don't like people as much as we used to. We could be a little agoraphobic. Anxiety is a big one. Go ahead and put that in there. And you could put some specificity, Some people don't socialize at all anymore. That's a lot of people. I see that all the time. So take that to the bank there. And I hope this helps you with question number 19, social activities. All right. Take care and have a great one. Bye.